Men die shortly after we retire because our identity is gone. We built the whole identity around work all day long. We need to be nasal breathers. Viagra was actually created for women. So eating a high protein diet, making sure that you're exercising with resistance exercise. I love the adaptogens because they help your body be more resilient. And you have one of the most amazing ones in history called ashwagandha in the Indian culture.
Leading nutritional biochemist, expert on health optimization, and the best-selling author of The Energy Formula. Our guest today on the Settle or Be Better podcast is Mr. Shawn Wells, who's going to be talking to us about biohacking, men's health, and a lot more. So welcome, Mr. Shawn, and over to you. Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about what stands out for you about your personal health and well-being story so far and your current work?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, we have that hero's journey where we've been through a lot as wounded healers, right? That's the reason why we're doing what we do, why we do podcasts, why we write books, why we speak on stage, why we have our social media, is because we've all been through a lot of things. And we want to tell that story and hopefully help others not have to go through the things that we've been through. And for me, that's definitely true. I had a very difficult childhood with abuse, my brothers running away at a very young age, some definitely some health issues, and overeating was kind of my solution for the difficulty that was going on. And then I became badly bullied in school. People would make fun of me constantly. I had a very large rear end for a boy. This was not good. And even teachers would make fun of me as well as all the students. And I became very depressed, low self-esteem, poor body image. And it wasn't until college that I felt like I had enough. And then I went to the other extreme and became anorexic with very disordered eating, probably eating about 400 calories per day. Um, and I went from, let's see, 300 pounds, which is about, I don't know, 150 kilos, down to about 70 kilos. So a massive swing, and I looked very, very bad. I think I'm centimeters. I'm trying to do the metric measurements here. I think I'm like 194 centimeters. So for me, like, this was very, very skinny. I also became orthorexic, where I was working out multiple times a day, where I had to eat 6 small meals to 8 small meals a day, and became obsessed with my eating in that direction, all the protein and all these things. And I was also working 16, 18 hours every day. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a day for years and years and years. And it all took its toll on me. I never believed I was good enough. I always had imposter syndrome. I think I was always seeking essentially my father's approval, like, for this, achievement, that it would, someday be enough and I would learn to love myself. But those things never came, and I kept working, and then I ended up getting a number of autoimmune conditions where I was in bed for 6 months, couldn't leave my bed, with Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's. Then I got a brain tumor. So I struggled. I struggled with the abuse I put myself through. I mean, I was abused early on, but it was me that was the abuser later on. I was gaslighting myself. I was attacking myself. I was berating myself for not being good enough. If something wasn't perfect, then it wasn't good enough. I could have done better. And I would play out these conversations in my head about how I could have done better, what I could have said better, or when someone said something to me like, what did they really mean? And I would spend hours thinking about what they just said to me. And so it's just severe depression, and definitely that imposter syndrome. And it just took me years of working through all these biohacks to learn how to dig myself out of that. And when I was in bed and not doing well, that's when I discovered paleo, fasting, keto, and those helped get me out of bed and get me back into life. And then a number of the supplements, doing great exercise, doing the biohacks like breath work, journaling, meditation, all helped. And then most recently, I had a very big shift using plant medicine, like psilocybin. That was pretty profound for me.
Amazing. That's an amazing story. And I'm sure that a lot of our listeners, especially the men listening to this, or the young boys listening to this, would really relate to it, because everybody at some point in their life do go through such issues where we do face body image issues, and so many of these things that probably it's tough to talk about also to other people, right? So I'm sure a lot of them can listen to this and relate to it. And you've been in this field for so long, and the knowledge that you have is like, I can't even begin to imagine or understand the level of knowledge and wisdom that you are sharing with us today. But what would you think are some of the biohacks that you wish you would have done in your 20s, in your early 20s, or that you would say men specifically in their 20s could start doing right away?
Well, that's a great question. And kind of going back into what I was just talking about, I think a lot of, for me, biohacking early on was extending the idea of I need to perform at a higher level. And that can be dangerous for, I think, what you're saying, men, but I think people in general, because it's kind of a masculinized world, a work world, right? A capitalistic world where performance is valued over creativity, over intuition, over, some things that are maybe more feminine traits, right? So it kind of makes masculine ultra masculine, and it makes feminine somewhat masculine because we're all driven to compete. And it's something that I gravitated to, was how do I get myself to sleep less, work more, get more productivity? And so a lot of the biohacks, were things that were, supplements that were around energy, most certainly. And that's where I have put a lot of my focus. I've patented a number of ingredients there. I have the book Energy Formula, obviously, and we can get into that. But I'd like to say, first and foremost, if I could go back, it would be granting myself grace. It would be doing the kind of more the softer side of biohacking, or we'll say optimization now, maybe a better term, where it's more of living in that balance of masculine and feminine energies, of where you certainly you have to hustle to go get it. You have to be in your sympathetic nervous system. You have to be in your masculine energy at times, of course. But there's times to also be relaxed, be healing, be creative. And those are important too. And then ultimately, the whole point of all of it should be that you're in your flow state, which is the balance of masculine and feminine, which is the idea of being stimulated and relaxed. Like, that's the ultimate place to be. That's where your genius is. That's the goal, is to get to flow state. So for me, like, we can get into like kind of the biohacks for energy, but also I would go back and do more meditation, inward reflection, prayer, sun gazing and forest bathing, and these grounding, and these kinds of things, like doing a lot more journaling and poetry, and taking time to breathe. Because I mean, I'm sure everyone listening thinks that they're going to get more by working more. But isn't it shocking and isn't it profound when we actually get more by working less? Like we have our best ideas when we finally relax. We have those creative insights come in. And those are the things that really move the needle versus can I just work another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Can I keep pushing even though I'm tired? The quality of work isn't that good. And do you really get that much more done? So that's the lie here, and something that I would definitely beg everyone to consider. Maybe this connects with some people. Um, but I can get into the things to increase your energy as well. But certainly taking care of yourself, having self care, getting massages, sitting down, listening to music, doing things like exercise that's fun, not just exercise that's like, I want to build more muscle and I need to like get to the gym. And that's great. But what's the type of exercise that is fun for you? Like for me, it's volleyball. I enjoy playing volleyball, like or shooting basketball by myself. Like there's some form of exercise that's more therapeutic for you that could be relaxing for you. It may be the gym, but for a lot of people that can be a grind too. And it's not a bad thing. Most certainly I encourage people to work out, to maintain muscle, to maintain cardiovascular fitness. But I would also find some things that are fun. And I think those are important.
Absolutely. And it's true that when you think about biohacking, like for someone new, it sounds so technical and, so complicated, very sciencey that, we have to go all and we have to eliminate all of these things and we have to like, be very data oriented and all of these
Yeah.
complicated things. But when you talk about the softer side of it or optimizing our health in these ways, it's a very fresh perspective and it also makes a lot of people more receptive to it. And I hope that at 20 something year olds listening to this, do consider everything that you mentioned about like journaling or taking things slow a little bit and relaxing, finding the balance between the masculine and feminine energy, because that's something we don't talk about very often. And a lot of us 20-year-olds might not relate to this at this phase, and we think that there's something I'd probably do in my 50s, or when I retire, or when I finally think about taking things slow. But it's actually true that giving these things as much importance as the much more tougher or challenging things that we would want to do in our life is really the need of the hour. So thank you for sharing that with us. And what would you say are some things that our 40 and 50-year-olds can begin with, and men in their 40s and 50s, because there might be a lot of them who probably have never had the chance to really even slow down or think about their health, or really prioritize it over the decades because of so many responsibilities, or taking care of their families and finances, so many things, right?
Mm.
And the health just doesn't get that much attention. And the ones who are just starting to focus on their health and well-being in their late 40s and 50s, what would be some of the biohacks that you would say are definitely goes for them that they should certainly begin with?
This is the idea. That's a great question. I love your questions. And they're like philosophical and scientific, like when I think about them, because like this is the idea that you can't give from an empty cup, right? That's the idea. Like, and so many people that are working hard out there that have a family, you know, they're giving and they're giving and they're giving, but it's at a level of sacrifice. Anyone that loves you, and certainly if you love yourself, you shouldn't be sacrificing. You should be able to find joy in the giving, find joy in the things that you do, the things that you do for work. Find joy in all these things because that's where life is. That's where the majority of your life is happening. So you need to find joy in these things. And so, again, it matters that you can prioritize yourself so that you can give fully. You want that cup full. So if you're not getting enough rest, that's probably my first and foremost thing, and something I've struggled with a lot of my life too, is getting enough rest and getting quality rest. So that's going to come down to great sleep hygiene, um, making sure that there aren't, and I love pets, but making sure that pets aren't in the bed. They can disrupt your sleep and certainly disrupt your intimacy, which matters. Absolutely. Making sure that the bedroom is what's called a sleep fortress. Do not put TVs in there, computers in there, an office in there. The whole idea, when you walk through that doorway to your bedroom, it should only be for two purposes: sleep and sex. And that's it. So it should feel like relaxed and intimate in there. And that is it. If you're bringing arguments in there, if you're bringing office in there, if you're bringing entertainment in there, your kids are constantly in there, the pets are constantly, like, that's not ideal. You need to make that essentially like Superman talks about, your fortress of solitude, like where you can like go and be quiet and be alone if you need to, and rest and relax. And so if you need blackout shades, that's good. If you have an air purifier in there, that's great. If you have plants in there that increase the level of oxygen and green, all of those things are good. Whatever brings about relaxation for you is critical. And going to bed at the same time every day and getting up at the same time every day is critical. And one of the biggest mistakes that many of us make is that we stay up later on the weekends and we get what's called social jet lag, to where it's like essentially traveling to another country many time zones away and then coming back and then expecting Monday morning you're going to feel okay. And it's not. If you're going to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. on the weekdays, but then you're staying up till 2, 3, 4 a.m. on the weekends, it's going to be hell on your circadian rhythm. And so that is not going to be ideal. So that's where sleep hygiene comes in. And then one of my favorite biohacks that is super cheap and easy is a lot of us end up breathing through our mouth. And that quality of sleep is very poor. We need to be nasal breathers all day long. We need to be nasal breathers. That's where the right temperature, the right moisture, the right oxygenation is happening. And filtering, and that's not happening through the mouth. And if you're waking up and your voice is hoarse and you're kind of groggy and more tired than you should be, a lot of times that's apnea, which is not just a light snore. Like a lot of people might have like that's kind of a light snore, and that's not bad. It's okay. That is, again, through the mouth. But if you're doing this kind of stuff where it's very disruptive, quite often going 30 seconds, 60 seconds without breathing, and then like gagging and choking, you're essentially in a like fight or flight sympathetic nervous system fight for your life throughout the night. And then you're surprised when you wake up groggy because you've been choking and gagging and not getting enough air. You're hypoxic. There's not enough oxygen going to the brain. And this is putting you at risk for stroke, for diabetes, for myocardial infarction, heart attack, all these things. And so, especially if you're 40 or 50, this is now a big risk. And of course, this is going to lead to your cortisol being way off, and epinephrine and adrenal fatigue and all of these things. And now you're running into situations where you're more insulin resistant, where you're like keeping more body fat because you're not sleeping well. So taping your mouth, as crazy as it sounds, maybe you as a biohacker have heard of this, but a lot of people haven't. If you can tape your mouth and while you're sleeping and breathe through your nose, it's amazing. It's also good to do while you're exercising. It might look weird at the gym, but if you exercise somewhere, maybe like more privately, try putting on some tape around your mouth and train yourself when it's difficult to be a nasal breather, and you'll find that you actually recover faster.
Wow, that's some great insight, especially on sleep and resting the right way, because that often gets left behind, and it's almost quite easy to begin with, right? I mean, it's nothing that complicated to think about or start applying right away. So thank you for that. And moving on to energy, we all have come to this understanding that finally that energy is the currency for us humans, and we are constantly now, at least the emerging biohackers are constantly thinking about hacking energy and thinking about health and well-being in that aspect, right? And you did mention that you also led a very busy lifestyle where you were working for like 15, 16 hours, and a lot of our listeners do belong to that population today, that
Yeah.
they work like longer shifts, like 10 plus hours of shifts every single day, and there's nothing new happening in their life apart from the going to work, coming back from work, sleeping, eating, nothing like that. So that's the cycle that they're repeating for the whole week. And to even start thinking about biohacking is like far out from their imagination currently, with all the stress that they are under, right? So what would you say are some things, some energy hacks? And obviously working out and eating clean is the very basic, and I mean they're probably doing it at some level, but what are we missing out, and what are some things that they can include in their routine with this busy schedule and start doing that would really help them feel more energetic, more active throughout the day, throughout the week?
Well, science shows us that there's a couple things correlated to living a long life. When you look at the blue zones where people live the longest, like Sardinia, Italy, one of the islands in Greece, Loma Linda, California, where is it? I'm trying to, Okinawa is another one. These are like blue zones where people live past 100, and Sardinia, Italy. And in those cultures, they've found a few things. One, they're almost all by the ocean, which is interesting. But two, they slow down and they have purpose and they're in a community. So they've found that these things are important to have a support structure, to find ways to slow down and not be a slave to the clock, the watch, whatever, and to enjoy your life and what it is you're doing, the work and the rest of your life. And I would also say that they believe that your work is not who you are. And this is really important for men. I think a lot of us as men, um, you get that question of like, what do you do? It's kind of like if you go to the gym, it's like, how much do you bench? And it's like we measure each other by like what we do and how much money we make. And this is one of the reasons why when men retire, men die. I worked in hospitals and nursing homes for a decade. Men die shortly after we retire because our identity is gone. We built the whole identity around work. Women, and this is more so true of prior generations, and now unfortunately women are kind of becoming more like men in the workplace where it's becoming their identity too. But women traditionally would become more focused on children and grandchildren and the home and generations and community and connecting with school and church and all these different things. And so when a woman was of that kind of retirement age, they had a lot to do and they still had a lot of purpose and identity. And this is why women would live well into their 90s, whereas men you'd see falling off very quickly after retirement. So I would challenge anyone listening to, figure out ways to slow down, find ways to connect, and certainly connect with the right people. You are a product of the 5 people that are closest to you. So choose those people with great intention. Don't let those people just simply be there because they're next to you at work, or they're your next door neighbor, or whatever it is. Find people, seek out people that you want to be like and emulate. And of course, invest in those relationships, make them two-way relationships. That's all really important. As far as One other huge thing, muscle mass and strength is critical to aging. So one of the top kind of psychological predictors is it's actually not happiness, by the way, it's satisfaction. We're not meant to be happy all the time. It's satisfaction with life. And that comes with the purpose and the slowing down and all those kinds of things. The other one on the physical side is strength and muscle mass. And so, especially like when we tend to fall as we get older, a fall can literally kill you because you don't have enough bone mineral density, you don't have enough muscle mass, you don't have enough control of your muscle. You fall, you break a hip, you go into a nursing home, you get a pressure ulcer, and it gets infected, and you're dead. And you could be 55 years old, you could be 65 years old and dead. So, one of the best determinants of healthy aging is battling what's called sarcopenia, this muscle loss as we age. So, eating a high protein diet, making sure that you're exercising with resistance exercise, that matters. Like cardio is great, but resistance exercise is king. So, we need to make sure we're moving our bodies, yes, but moving our bodies against resistance. It needs to be difficult. Right? That's how we grow stronger. That's how we adapt. That's hormesis, is it needs to be difficult. So absolutely using weight, working out, making sure that you're gaining in strength, because there's also muscle innervation involved there. There's the whole nervous system that has to recruit these muscles. And this also keeps your brain sharper, and it gives you neuroplasticity. It keeps what's called BDNF high, which is brain derived neurotrophic factor. You're more neuroplastic. So the more you're working out, the more you can actually take on more difficult tasks. Like the more you can learn that new language easier, the more you can find that new way to work, the more you can learn a new instrument, or go to a new country and assimilate better. Like that's all possible easier when you're working out.
Absolutely. And it also does gives us a great sense of accomplishment every single time we do this, or every single time there's a little progression in any workout or any set that we're doing, and working against resistance. And it does give us a sense of accomplishment, which really lacks today in, when we get lost in work targets and so many of these other stressors in life. And the first part you mentioned is so true, that even today, if you ask someone just the question like, who are you? The answer, the first one would be their designation at work. And because we do tend to define ourselves by what we do in our work life, and that consumes us over the decades. And if we don't really like stop and pause and slow down a little bit, it would really slip out of our hands, and we would be like forced to do things about our health, which would have been rather easier in the beginning. So thank you for sharing. That was a great insight. And you also talk about coffee very interestingly, that coffee is dead. What do you mean by that? And is does it mean we should stop having a coffee? Does it mean we should replace it with something else?
That's a great question too. You're loaded with great questions. I love this. So coffee does obviously contain caffeine, and about 90% of the planet is consuming caffeine in one form or another every day. So this is the most addictive, most powerful substance in the history of mankind. It's an important substance in that we wouldn't have the British Stock Exchange, the American Stock Exchange. We wouldn't have had the rise of the industrial age. We wouldn't have third shift capitalism. I mean, in Europe, in the 1800s, they would drink wine and beer and spirits during the day, while they were at work. Like everything changed radically when caffeine really became prominent, and especially coffee. And so even the Catholic Church like actually approved it. Like the Pope had to like kind of review it. and he approved it. And so it's a really fascinating story. There's a book on this, Michael Pollan, called Caffeine, where he goes into depth on how important caffeine is as a substance to humanity. But 60% of us have the CYP1A2 gene, where we're slow metabolizers of caffeine. And we think all of us experience caffeine similarly. We don't. Fast metabolizers, it can be about a 1.5 hour half-life. Slow metabolizers, it can be 10.5 hour half-life. So this is, I don't know, whatever it is, a 6-7x difference, which means for some of us, 3 days later, caffeine's still in your system. And so this is disrupting our sleep. And if you have like an Aura ring like this, you can track your HRV and you can see just how much it's impairing your sleep. And so having caffeinated substances may be giving you that irritability, anxiety, brain fog, sleep disruption, all of these things. And you're wondering why you're feeling tired all the time and you're stuck in this caffeinated loop. And there's also with caffeine habituation and adaptation, where habituation is the physiologic dependence on it. There's a study with mice where after 3 days, they needed that level of caffeine that they started on by the third day to just get to baseline. They were no longer like rising above in terms of cognitive and athletic performance. They needed to just have caffeine to get to where everyone else is day to day. And you see when people are zombies in line at Starbucks and they're like, I just need my coffee. Like, morning is hell without my coffee. If that's you, that is habituation. And then adaptation is this kind of declination of effect. And those are tied into each other, like where you kind of get less and less and less of a response over time. And then people start using more and more and more. If you look at, like, for example, a Coca-Cola, when I was a kid, like that was like, whoa, that was going to like get you hype and crazy, right? That's like 60 milligrams of caffeine. We now have energy drinks that are 300 milligrams. A Red Bull and Monster, when they first came out, they were 80 to 120 milligrams. We now have Bang and all these energy drinks that are 300 milligrams. Some of these pre-workout powders are 400 milligrams. I mean, this is a lot of caffeine, and this has happened only in 1 or 2 generations that this has just gone dramatically higher because of our level of exhaustion. And this is only going to play into that adrenal fatigue more. So one of the ingredients that I've created is a metabolite of caffeine that solves this. You don't have the sleep disruption, the dysregulation of your sleep quality. You don't have the anxiety, the arrhythmias, all these kinds of things. And you get a cleaner level of energy. It inhibits adenosine just like caffeine does, but you also get nitric oxide to the brain. You get glutathione and catalase increased, which are master antioxidants, and you're reducing oxidative stress. You're getting an increase in acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, all important to the brain and your mood. And you're getting increases in BDNF, again, that neuroplasticity protein that's so key to our brain staying young, like literally creating new neurons. And then lastly, it actually reduces beta amyloid plaque, which is associated with Alzheimer's. So like paraxanthine, this ingredient that I'm talking about, this metabolite of caffeine, is protecting the brain. And it's certainly one that I'm most excited about. We have about 8 studies on it, 23 patents filed. And I think that is the future. That's kind of the caffeine 2.0 is paraxanthine.
Amazing. And I hope that it's available to our Indian listeners to order and sort of access as well.
We're working on it with India. We're pretty far into it. It is available through Muscle Tech and Hydroxycut, which are available in India, but we're working on getting it there. But it's certainly, if you can get it through the US market, that would be the easiest right now, but it should be there very soon.
Amazing. That's great news for us. And, the last segment would be about supplementing, since you are such an expert when it comes to supplementing, and that's what you talk about with so much detail. And I think here also we'll have to talk about it in a very, a manner that it's available in India, because probably not a lot of them might be available here, or uh, probably we haven't even heard about them at some level, right? But when it comes to supplementing, two aspects here, just for we are focusing on men's health today because we've had a lot of guests, talk about specifically about women's health and so many aspects, and very few talking in so much detail about men's health. So it would be great if we could focus on that. And what would be some supplements that are your non-negotiables? Because when it comes to supplementing, it's quite complicated to think about that. Okay, do I need to get my blood test done every single time, or do I need to consult with my doctor? But what would be some of your supplements that are non-negotiables, that probably someone who is working out on a regular basis, doing a lot of things for their health, can start including these in their life? And also, you talk about supplementing in terms of mental health, right? To improve our mental health and to
Mm,
improve our brain health. So, how can we approach that?
great questions again. So supplements that I wouldn't avoid, uh, right off the bat, protein. I think, going back to maintaining that lean body mass. And I will tell you that if you are a vegan, yes, you've probably heard that those protein qualities are not as high, that they're not as complete a protein. More importantly, leucine, which is the key amino acid that drives muscle protein synthesis, meaning the growth and maintenance of muscle tissue, it's about half the level in vegan proteins as it is animal proteins. So there's a few things that you could do there. You could either double your protein intake as a vegan, or you can add leucine to your vegan proteins and supercharge them. There's a study that shows that that has equivalent benefit. So if you add around 1 or 2 grams of leucine to whatever protein that you're consuming, especially these vegan protein sources, you can supercharge them and get all the benefit of someone that would have an animal protein. So that would be a big one that I'd recommend. And along those lines would be creatine. Creatine is very protective to lean body mass, to also muscular power and strength. But beyond that, we're finding it's a great methylator and protects DNA. It protects bone mass. It protects the reproductive organs. And then really fascinating research on the brain, including traumatic brain injury and concussions. So it's really protective of the brain. So creatine really is amazing across the board. I'd recommend that everyone take it, male or female. Next up would be a vitamin mineral, but the problem is a lot of these multivitamins don't have what I would call coenzymated methylated B vitamins. So you want to look for these B vitamins that are in their active form. So for B12, this would be methylcobalamin. For folate, it's 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. And this makes a huge difference. Some people have the MTHFR gene where they can't convert folate to its active. And so you may be taking enough folate, but you may not be getting it into the cell, and you may actually be anemic. And so this happens a lot with about 30% of the population. So this is something to certainly look at. But I like all of these active forms of B vitamins across the board. And then with the minerals, I like getting the organic amino acid chelates. So this is things like magnesium would be magnesium glycinate or threonate, where an amino acid is attached. It actually enhances the bioavailability dramatically. When you take like a magnesium oxide or calcium carbonate, these have much lower bioavailabilities. So methylated B vitamins, and getting organic minerals. Next up, I love the adaptogens because they help your body be more resilient. And you have one of the most amazing ones in history called ashwagandha in the Indian culture. But if you look through the history of all cultures, you see all of these different adaptogens are the most important herb to each culture. If you look in Asia, it's ginseng. If you look in South America, it's maca. If you look in Russia, it's rhodiola. India, it's ashwagandha, right? Like, so I love all of these compounds across the world because they're incredible at helping your body be more resilient. And that is a way that like we can essentially stay more in that flow state, right? We can handle more stress. We have more ability to take on physical and mental stress when we're taking these adaptogens. And that's the key, like, especially think about through COVID and all these things. Resilience is massive. So it's our flexibility mentally, it's our flexibility physically that we can take on all these different stressors. So I love bringing in the adaptogens, and I like kind of rotating through them. Like, if I use ashwagandha one month, then I use rhodiola the next, I might use maca the next, something like that. And those are amazing because they help just normalize you. They help normalize your testosterone, normalize your blood pressure, normalize your blood glucose. All of these things improve your sleep, but improve your energy through the day. So they're wonderful across the board. Let's see. What else from men? I guess I should get into like maybe like a testosterone booster or something like that. I would say blood flow would be really good. So looking at things that improve blood flow would be arginine, the amino acid. Citrulline helps recycle arginine. And those are going to help with nitric oxide, blood flow, pumps, but certainly it's going to help with getting better erections. And by the way, which is obviously important to intimacy and testosterone and well-being, the more sex you get, the better you feel and the higher your testosterone is. So having a healthy sex life and honestly avoiding porn probably as much as possible would be ideal. That's just something I'll throw out there. But I think a lot of women don't realize that along the same lines that, Viagra was actually created for women. And the clitoris essentially is a tiny penis, and essentially it's a phallus, right? And so blood flow to the clitoris is just as important. It works the same way. So having these PDE5 inhibitors or having these amino acids like arginine and citrulline can improve blood flow to the penis or to the clitoris. And while it's more obvious when a man can't get an erection, and obviously that makes sex more difficult, it's also true that like a woman wouldn't get as erect a clitoris and wouldn't have as much sensation, etc. So it's really important for both genders to have proper blood flow. And another thing along those lines is if your blood pressure is off, you won't get proper blood flow. And if you have insulin resistance or diabetes, that plays a role in not getting enough nitric oxide and blood flow. So certainly controlling that. And that's my next ingredient that I love is berberine, which comes from your culture as well, or the active that I've worked on and patented dihydroberberine. Either one of those are amazing at controlling blood sugar. I think it's the most profound ingredient. Berberine actually beat metformin head to head, which is probably the most famous diabetes drug. But it's also powerful not only at anti-diabetes, but we also see for anti-aging because glycation, oxidation, inflammation are so tied into each other that even if your blood sugar is healthy, the lower that you can get your blood sugar and insulin, the longer you live. Because when those are down, autophagy, which is a cellular detox takes place. Growth factors are released, like insulin growth factor, IGF-1. Um, all these different peptides are released that heal and clean out your body, BPC 157. All of these things are released when your insulin and your blood sugar, your blood glucose are down. So those are some things that I would recommend.
Amazing. That's a great list of supplements, and it's good to know them because I have personally heard of them, and a lot of our listeners might be already familiar with them. So it's quite easy to source them over here in India as well. So that's some great news for us. And something that I forgot to ask you earlier, and we could cover it in a few minutes probably, but about chronic fatigue, because you did mention that was one of the things that you had to fight and recover from. And what happens is that, at least in India, I haven't heard many doctors even talk about fatigue or chronic fatigue with their patients, and we don't even know if we are going through it, or is it just a new normal for a body because it's under so much stress, right? So, how do you sort of detect that you have been fatigued over the years? And, uh, what are some big alarming things happening in our body that we might be ignoring that is a sign or symptom for being under chronic fatigue, and how can we sort of address this?
Yeah, so chronic fatigue syndrome is not some made up thing, but it's certainly like a larger term that's not really getting to the core of what's happening. Um, Really, it's revolving around what's called insufficient cellular energy, which is also an acronym called ICE, or in the brain, it's called brain energy gap. There's essentially a shortfall of ATP. You're not producing enough ATP for what your body needs. So, in time, you will have chronic fatigue. You will also have hypertonic muscles where your muscles won't relax, they will just stay kind of flexed and tense. When someone goes to massage you, they're like, "Ah, you're always so tense," right? It's that kind of thing. Fibromyalgia, where there's always inflammation around your muscles and your tissues, like even your fascia is like inflamed. You actually have neuroinflammation, that kind of like constant brain fog where your synapses aren't firing as well, and there's actually atrophy of the brain, and you're more insulin resistant in the brain. All of these things are happening, and certainly adrenal fatigue as well, because how do you kind of power through this? Like for a while, it's going to be in in relation to neurotransmitters. You're going to be upregulating things like epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, and you'll become addicted to those things. And then certainly using cortisol, etc. And then that leads to adrenal fatigue. But how do you get that energy? You're going to use porn, rap, heavy metal, driving fast, like watching movies with explosions and sex, and all these kinds of things, so that you can get social media, like addiction, like dopamine, 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 dopamine hits. It's like keeping you going. But in time, like you're gonna hit a point where nothing gives you energy or joy or lights you up anymore. And to me, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. And that's where you can get when you're essentially in a place with a shortfall of energy, and you can be apathetic, and you can just kind of be a zombie walking through life. And that's not a place to be. And that's exactly the opposite of what I was talking about with these blue zones, where it's about having the right people around you, and taking your time, enjoying your food, enjoying company, enjoying what you do, slowing down, having purpose. Like that's the idea in Japan called ikigai, when you have your purpose and you're living for purpose. And that's something to pursue, is like asking yourself every day, does this thing light me up? Does this give me energy, or does it take it away? We have a lot of people in our lives that are energy vampires. that are stealing energy from us. We need to get around people that give us energy, that light us up, and then certainly be that person.
Absolutely. That's some great insight and packed with a really beautiful message for our audience. So, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it does make so much sense to think about it in terms of how we can relate to it with the current scenarios. So, thank you so much. And as we conclude our episode today, is there any last message or thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
I will go back to the idea of grant yourself grace. You are good enough. If you're listening right now, you are loved. You are perfect. You are perfect as you are. You do not need to be fixed. You do not need to be healed. Anyone talking about the word healed is wrong. I like to think about myself as a beautiful Ferrari or some kind of car like that, that's just like an amazing, beautifully made car that is capable of great speeds, that makes people say wow, but sometimes gets dirty. All you need is to be washed off from time to time. All you need to be is reminded of your beauty and your perfection. God made you exactly how you were supposed to be, and you are here to experience that and relish that and be your best so that you can make impact. So you don't need to change. You don't need to fix whatever is broken. All of this stuff is a lie. So I just wanted to express that.
Amazing. That's a beautiful message. Thank you so much, Mr. Shawn, for being here today and gracing our podcast. It was an amazing episode, and there are just so many insights in just this 1 hour of recording with you. So we are really grateful to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Sakshi. Yeah, so if people want to check out my book, energyformula.com, and I have like some free giveaways, like a hidden chapter, recipe book, all kinds of stuff there. You can get a hardcover or soft cover, the Audible, so the recorded version, and then an ebook. And I do have a course that'll be coming out next year on all of
Oh,
it.
wow.
And I am recording a quest with Mind Valley, actually with Vision of Mind Valley. We're working on a whole supplement course. But also follow me on Instagram at Shawn Wells, ShawnWellS. I have a ton of content there, all these different supplement stacks. If you want to get into more hardcore biohacking, I have it there. But I do talk a lot about mental health and psychedelics and nutrition and working out and all kinds of things. So yeah, that would be great.
Absolutely. And we would definitely encourage our audience to reach out to you and also get a hand on your book.
Mhm.
The details, the links would be in the description below so they can easily reach out and check all the amazing things that you are offering us today. So thank you so much once again for being here today.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
And that's it for today's episode. I am Sakshi Pawar and I'll be your host for the Settle or Be Better podcast. So stay tuned while we bring more inspiring stories. You know the drill. Subscribe to the Settle or Be Better podcast, like, share, and comment on our videos. And oh, hit the bell icon because you don't want to miss the mind boggling health discussions we're about to bring for you. Why settle when you can be better?